Hi everybody, I'm Dan Joseph from MRC-TV. Today, I have a very special guest joining me via Skype. You know him from Fox and Friends, but he is also the author of George Washington's Secret Six, the spy ring that saved the American Revolution. He is Brian Kilmeade, and he joins me now. Thanks for coming in, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Now, look, this is a great book. This is going to be a great stocking stuffer. It's now available in paperback. For anybody who's interested in American history, or for just anybody who likes a good spy thriller. Either one. It just crosses the spectrum there. But first of all, explain why you decided to write this and how what happened here that you describe was so integral to winning the American Revolution.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. I think the average American is interested in our history. Some are very passionate about it. Some do it for a living. Some are always interested. Some don't know because they didn't have good teachers, didn't have a good background. When they were younger, they weren't going to Barnes & Noble and picking up history books. But I found when I was starting to tell people these stories, whether they're plumbers, executives, accountants, they would always lean in. And essentially in 1989, I've always been interested in history and how it relates to the news. And then when I stumbled upon this story in 1989 that George Washington came down this path to thank his spies on Long Island, and my answer was, what spies? Even though I lived on Long Island my whole life and went to Long Island University, then learned more and more about it. The person, the historian who was putting the line in the road, actually told me, wrote down, go to the library, this is a book, when people actually went to the library.
All right, now I don't want to give away too much because people need to read this, but just a little detail. Washington thought that the American victory was at risk, and he retreated from New York. So in order to save New York from falling into British hands, this spy ring was created, the Culper spy ring. Now, who were they? How did they come together? And what did they do to turn the tide here?
Well, they did British hands, and they held it for most of the war. The Washington knew if he can't win without it, so he had to find a way to get it back, and that's what he schemed with. When he went to square off with the British Army, he almost got wiped out, so he knew he had to out-spy him, out-think him, out-maneuver him. So he had to get citizen spies, spies that had to have a reason to be there without suspicion. So he got a farmer in Abraham Woodhull. He got a longshoreman in Caleb Brewster. He got a grocery store owner in Robert Townsend, who also morphed into a journalist, and James Rivington, a British journalist who switched sides in the middle of the war. And you also had Austin Rowe, a bartender who would actually go the 60 miles from Manhattan, as we know it today, on a ferry to Long Island, as we know it, Setauket, Long Island. If you're familiar with the area, it is on one of the eastern ends. They'd get the information from Manhattan. Austin Rowe would get word, he'd go pick it up. As he was picking up supplies for his bar, jam the notes in there or put it in a sock, and give it to Abraham Woodhull. He'd add some information to it, give it to the longshoreman, and he literally would row across the Long Island Sound 35 miles, all types of weather for 4.5 years, and get Washington this timely information.
Wow.
And through it, you see how they got better and better at it.
Now, there's one agent, one of these spies, who we know very little about. It's actually a female agent. All we know her as is Agent 355. You go into greater detail in the paperback than in the original copy, talking about her. What do we know about her, and how does she play into this story?
Well, if you open up the book, you can see a ledger in the book. So, for example, you might be number 19, I might be number 25. Just another layer of keeping your identity secret. Another way for somebody who goes, who's 25, who's 19? Washington was 714, Woodhull would be 711, Townsend would be 712. Well, this woman had no name next to her. It just said 355, the lady. So we figured she did most of her work in Manhattan, had to be accepted behind British lines, and we have 7 different people it could be. I mean, we don't think she survived the war, just judging by the way the letters responded, the tone of the letters. And when she came in, Abraham Woodhull referred to her as the spy that's going to be an extreme help for all of us the rest of the way. And we believe that she is, out of everybody there, from possibly Benedict Arnold's wife to this other woman named Elizabeth Bergen, I believe it was her.
Okay.
And she is somebody you should look up last. But everybody, every woman, every mom, every aunt that wants to show their daughter that women mattered in the Revolutionary War, actually to win the war, and Abigail Adams wasn't enough an example. You have 7 examples here.
Obviously, right now in the news, we have the enhanced interrogation techniques, the memo the Democrats put together. Washington used some of them too, though. I mean, Washington used interrogation techniques. He had to in order to get information out of the British in order to save the American Revolution. How do they compare, And what should Americans know about this in order to put what we're doing now and what we did in the days following 9/11 into greater context?
Well, it's real clear. There were rules, as Stephen Colbert pointed out the other night, that Washington had. But once the war started, and the British were absolutely brutal, they would starve guys to death. They would shoot them. They would amputate limbs. What they did in Nathan Hale. I opened up the book with Nathan Hale. They didn't give this guy a trial. They caught him. In 3 days, he was hanged at 66th and 3rd in Manhattan. So Washington said, hey, guys, we might be at war, but there are rules. The British kept ignoring them. The thing that got their attention, and it's written up, and we referred to it, they don't refer to it in my book, but in the information and the research we're doing for the book, in Logan Burns' book, Blood of Tyranny, they talk about Washington. The only thing that got the British attention is eye for an eye. They say, we're going to start treating your guys bad if you start treating our guys bad. So even if it's an officer or it's an infantryman, they are going to have some harsh treatment. And it was only up until Washington started giving the harsh treatment, that's when the British started treating our guys with some respect. So they had to take extreme measures in the middle of a war, because war at any level at any time is never pretty. And I think we should keep that in mind today.
Maybe if more Americans knew about that, they'd have a different view of the things we had to do after 9/11. Thank you so much for joining us. One last question here. There obviously extensive research went into this book. I mean, you probably took you years. Am I assuming that correctly?
Don Yeager, yeah.
Okay, and yes, that's right. And Don Yeager, who co-authored it with you. Why has it taken so long for Americans to know about this? I mean, obviously you did a great thing by bringing it to their attention. Why did this get lost for so long in the shuffle of American history?
Well, number one, the spies didn't want anyone to know about it, so they lived and died and didn't tell anybody. Number two, Washington was sworn to secrecy, and he kept his secret. Can you imagine if he told Benedict Arnold when he thought he was loyal to the Patriot cause, and it turns out he was a agent? They all would have been killed and destroyed, and the war would have been lost. So one thing is, Washington kept their letters. It's almost saying, hey, I'm not going to tell you who this is, but you can put together this puzzle if you are dogmatic enough about it. Jared Sparks in the 1850s thought they got close. Others thought they got close. It took to the 1930s for Morton Pennypacker to find out. But then in comes the Depression. In comes World War II. And then 1950, Morton Pennypacker dies, writes his book. It's a mild success. Finds the last spy. But no one's really focusing on that. Next thing you know, we're in the 60s, another book comes out. In the 70s, nothing. And in the 80s, another book. And then there's Alexander Rose did a fine book. And then we thought we had additional information we were able to compile, and we thought we could bring it even further. But there's no doubt about it. There's more information to be learned. We had a deadline, and now we just got to go make that deadline and go do a movie.
All right, well, I mean, a movie possibly. Is there a sequel on the way? Is there going to be another book that follows up on this?
Well, yeah, I don't want to really announce it yet, but
Okay.
There's another book that's going to be coming out around this time that almost picks up where this one left off.
All right, wonderful. Well, it's a great book. Recommend it to everybody. It's like a modern day spy thriller, and you don't have to be even a history buff in order to enjoy it. And it's actually something that younger people, I think, can read and really get into it and build themselves up an interest into American history. Brian Kilmeade, thank you so much for joining us. Come back anytime. All right.
Thanks so much.